So today we're going to talk about what's better, gas or diesel in your pickup truck that you're pulling your RV with. So there's some controversy on this, and you might not agree with what I tell you, but we'll talk about it anyway, and we'll see how it goes. So what's better to pull your RV trailer, gas or diesel? I've had a little experience with this, so let's take a look and see what we see. So my background is ASE certified master tech. I own my own heavy truck repair shop for 15 years, and I was a mechanic long before that. And the last thing I did was fleet maintenance manager for a fleet of 8,000 trucks of every size, and we had at least 3,000 pickup trucks. I did that for about 16 years or so. There are three questions really you need to answer. So what do you need? What can you afford? And what do you want? Basically, that's the three questions you got to look at. So first, let's look at the differences between gas and diesel. Things have really improved over the past, my lifetime, when I first got into the mechanics business. Horsepower was nothing, and torque was real limited on everything. So today's engines are just blow the older stuff away. And people used to pull around, trailers and things with trucks, pickups years ago. So can you pull almost any kind of a trailer with a gas engine? Yeah, you probably can. It's just how fast you're going up the hill. That's really the big difference. As long as it's not overloading the truck, you can do it. I mean, what I did is I ran some numbers through AI. That's the way you do it nowadays, right? 2026 equipment and what's available. So with the Ford 2026, you got a 6.8 liter V8. You got a 7.3 liter V8, both gas, and then you got 2 horsepower ratings basically of 6.7 Power Stroke diesels. And there's a pretty big difference, especially with the Fords. You can gain quite a bit of horsepower if you go to the high output, and torque is over double. So you definitely have more ability with the diesel. So that's really not a question here. That 7.3 gas, I've had some experience with that. I actually, quit my job about 2.5, 3 years ago. So we were buying quite a few of those 7.3 gas, and they're like bulletproof. They're a pretty great engine. You can't say that about every Ford engine, but the Chevy, you got basically 2 choices on the newer stuff: a 6.6 gas and the 6.6 Duramax diesel. And you got a hefty horsepower increase with the diesel, and you've got about double the torque again. Not quite as much as the Power Stroke, but it gives you a lot more. And then you got the Ram. So 2026 Ram, you got the 6.4 gas. Torque's a little low on that one compared to some of the other ones. 405 horsepower, and then the 6.7 Cummins inline 6. Cummins 6.7 is basically the same engine they use in a medium duty truck. So the pickup truck version, you have a lot more horsepower, and a lot more torque, believe it or not, than the medium duty truck, because when you dial up the horsepower and you dial up the torque, you're stressing all the components a lot more. And this really actually goes across the board too, with the Power Strokes and the Duramax. They do the same thing. You go into an F450 or 550, you have less power and less torque. So they back those down because they're able to carry more weight. And if you hold it to the floor forever with all that horsepower and all that torque, you're really stressing those engines. So they dial them back for the heavier trucks. So it's only in the lighter trucks that you have that kind of monster engines. But the Cummins, again, is it's basically the same engine they put in medium duty trucks and Freightliners and the bigger stuff. So they're a really good engine, real durable. But when you dial up the horsepower, you dial up the torque, you're shortening the life some. Usually a pickup truck, you're not going extreme miles and working them crazy hours every day. So that's the difference. They hope that they'll last. So there is no contest with between diesel and gas as far as horsepower and torque. There's it's basically the diesel just wins flat out. That's not even the issue. It's going back to the list there of what do you need? Do you need the diesel or not? That's the question. Do you want to spend the extra money? I discussed earlier that going back 20, 25, 30 years, an engine have 150 horsepower. So, talking about the costs, here's where we start coming up with the issues. So, to start with, diesel, and most people realize this, a diesel is like at least $10,000 more when you buy the unit new for that option. So right off the bat, you got $10,000 that you're spending. And it used to be that you could make that back up over time if you drove the truck enough miles to save money on fuel over a period of time. So basically, that's where people, made out eventually and we calculated in our fleet department that we needed to, this would be 5 years ago, 6 years ago, 7 years ago. There wasn't quite as much difference in the price of diesel as there is right now. And we figured we had to drive the truck about 300 to 350,000 miles before we ate up that $10,000 premium for the engine. And that's with no failures. And the engine had to keep running without a failure for that length of time. Good luck with that, in my opinion. So let's get into that fuel cost. So today's fuel cost, diesel is like $1.40 more. And so if you I took 100,000 miles as a comparison. So you drive 100,000 miles pulling a trailer half of the time, half of those miles. It would cost about $28,300 on the gas truck at 14 miles to the gallon with today's pricing, and about $29,900 for a diesel getting 18 miles to the gallon. So you're in the hole, another $1,600 for the diesel at this point, after 100,000 miles. And this might, make some people wonder, and there's other if you drive a lot of miles with the truck empty back and forth to work, you're going to get more than 18 miles to the gallon maybe with the diesel. And so you might eventually make that back. But again, you got to drive it 200,000-300,000 miles to break even with what you're going to save. So if you pull a trailer all the time, or you're pulling really heavy trailers at highway speeds like all the time, then the diesel can give you an advantage in the cost. If you're working a gas engine really hard, pulling all the time, heavy loads or high speeds, then the diesel can actually save you some money. You can break even or save a little money on fuel because it's more efficient. The engine's more efficient. So diesel wins this one. So if you got a fifth wheel, a big huge fifth wheel with a toy hauler in the back and it weighs 16,000 pounds, and you're pounding the thing down the road 5, 6, 7 hours a day after day after day, probably diesel would be a definite you should consider. But most people don't do that. I don't know why you'd want a big fifth wheel if all you do is drive it around, right? You want to stop somewhere and spend some time. But anyway, if you are doing that, then okay, fine. Or if you're a commercial hauler and you're hauling a big fifth wheel flatbed trailer hauling cars all over the country, that's different. It's probably definitely a diesel application. So cost of maintenance, another cost. So because that you have double the amount of oil in the diesel, in most cases at least double than you do in the gas engine, the oil filters are more expensive, they're bigger, and you need to replace the fuel filters on the diesel, and you don't have fuel filters on a gas engine. You need to have a sock maybe in the fuel tank, and that's about it. There's another issue with diesels. You can get water in gasoline or diesel fuel. I mean, that's just happens. And it's common. The problem with it is the diesels don't like water. The gas engines can take a certain amount of water, and it's they still keep going. But diesels can't. So if you get enough water into the filters, it starts passing through into the fuel system. And I've had a bunch of problems with that. So I recommend changing the fuel filters on the diesel every time, even though it's $100 and some odd bucks for filters. So that right there is expensive. So you're basically talking double the cost, at least double the cost on the diesel compared to a gas oil change. What are the advantages of a diesel? Well, when we discussed this in our fleet department, we had a lot of people out in the field that wanted the diesels because they wanted to be able to push their foot down and have things happen, right? And they were pushing to get all diesel trucks, which they already had basically. But we were looking at costs, we were looking at all the numbers, and how much do we want to spend to have our guy go over the top of the hill faster, 20 or 30 miles an hour faster. Was how much is that worth? When you're trying to make a living, make a business profitable, that is less and less important. I mean, if it took him an extra day to go over the top of the hill, that would be different. But we're only talking a few minutes to get over the top of this major hill, right? So we were actually doing away with the diesel trucks and buying more gas unless the application warranted it. So that's something we started doing extensively, is less and less diesels. And so, you can accelerate faster. You can get down that access ramp to an expressway faster and merge into traffic easier with a big heavy load. And there are also diesels in most cases have engine brakes that, will help you slow down or maintain a slower speed going down a hill. So, that's all good. So it's helpful, but not absolutely critical. Here's something that the dealer won't tell you. If you get water in the fuel and it destroys the fuel system, it voids the warranty. So I have paid for dozens and dozens of fuel systems. And 3-4 years ago, it was over $9,000. They replaced everything. The tank, the fuel lines, the injectors, the fuel pumps, right through everything. That's their standard operating procedure when you have water that gets into these things. I had one unit that had 700 miles on it. It was an F350, I believe. Or a 450, I'm not sure, can't remember. But anyway, it had 700 miles on it and got water in the fuel. So the thing only been filled up like 2 or 3 times, and it got water in the fuel, went through and destroyed the fuel system. So it had 700 miles on it, no warranty. Sorry. Can you imagine that? You buy, you spend $100,000 on a pickup truck and you drive it 700 miles and you got to spend $9,000 out of your pocket because you got water in the fuel. And again, this doesn't even bother. You never have an issue with a gas truck. One of the other issues that we had a bunch of is we had gasoline pumped into the diesel trucks. And the same thing, destroy the fuel system, if not the engine, depending on how far they tried to drive the thing afterwards. Again, a gas engine, you dump the fuel out of it and you flush it out a little bit and off you go on your merry way. But diesel just destroys it. So if you ever put gas in diesel, don't even start it. Just call a wrecker if you realize it beforehand. So just a warning. So, and then, okay, so you got a warranty that doesn't necessarily cover everything. And now the warranty runs out at 100,000 miles or less, depending on whose engine it is. And then what? Engine replacement on a gas engine is about, can be, 9, 10, 11,000, 12,000, somewhere in that range. A diesel 3-4 years ago was costing at least $21,000. And that's if all the components are in good shape. They go along with that because you get, obviously a stripped engine. So you're transferring a lot of parts over. So double, again, it's double to replace the diesel and a gas engine. And things happen. Okay, theoretically, it should last 300,000 miles, but that doesn't mean yours is going to. All right, it depends on a lot of things. And the average one will maybe last that long, maybe the newer ones. The older ones didn't last at all. I mean, a 6-liter Ford diesel was junk. And then they improved it by making it a 6.4. Their improvement was worse than the original. That's when they were buying international engines. So that's when they came up with their own engine, the 6.7, which is better. It's better. Not perfect, but it's better. And, they keep trying to improve it, I guess. My experience has been that diesels cost more to maintain, cost more to run, cost more to buy, cost more. And even if you could, like in the old days, if you could drive it long enough to make up the difference in cost, one failure and then you're just blown out of the water. You never can catch up. And most of them had issues, a turbo, or some injectors or something that happened. And we tried to get rid of them, by 5 or 6 years and 200,000 miles or so. I replaced a 6.4 diesel 4 times in 45,000 miles. It was warranty, but the truck was just down for ages. I mean, it would take 2 or 3 weeks if they had an engine to put an engine in, and then it'd go 10,000 more miles and blow up. We went through a ton of those, a ton. And then they get off warranty and blow up, and it was our problem. And wow, it was crazy. But like I say, the 6.7 is way better than that. I don't advise anybody to buy a 6-liter or 6.4 diesel in any Fords. They're awful. And somebody might have problems with that, but that's my experience. We spent millions of dollars in replacing those engines. So we'll go back to those 3 questions. So, what do you need? What can you afford? And what do you want? And those kind of are tied together, those questions. So, what do you need? All right. Will a gas engine do the job? Yes, almost always. There's tremendous more horsepower than what you used to have in a gas engine. So all these engines are over 400 horsepower. I mean, that would be a race car in the 60s, right? I mean, you didn't have hardly anything that had 400 horsepower in the 60s or 70s. And then the 70s, when the emission stuff came in, the horsepower dropped to nothing. So these things will blow the doors off of a high performance car from the 70s, if there was such a thing. So can you pull a load up a hill? I mean, the torque is over 400 foot-pounds. That's not bad, right? So it's not, will it do the job? Is it going to be fast enough for you? Are you willing to pay more to be faster to go up the hill so you can show off passing somebody on the expressway, right? Pass those trucks and pass some other fifth wheel on the road. That's really what it comes down to. Are you willing to pay for that added power, or can you get by with something with a little less? You can pull any paved hill, in the country with one of these pickups with the gas motors in it. If you're pulling a really extremely heavy trailer and you're doing it all the time, or you're in the mountains all the time, pulling massive hills all the time, all right, maybe it gets smarter. And like I said, if you're pulling really, really hard, the diesels, you don't have your foot stuffed into it as far, to make that hill. So you can save a little bit, maybe a little bit of fuel, and get up the hill faster. If you're doing it all the time, it becomes, your time you're wasting if you're slowed down to 30 miles an hour, go up the hill. You're doing 40 instead of 70 or something. Of course, if you're pulling a trailer, I'm not sure you should be doing 70, but that's a whole nother story. So, diesel may be the choice if you're pulling a really heavy load or you're in mountainous areas all the time. So, I'll concede to that. And that's what, we were doing. If we had units that were in a mountainous area, then we'll get you a diesel, right? And we didn't stick them with a gas engine, but that's a little different. There is some efficiency that you can get from having a worker not tied up forever. And then, next question is, what can you afford? Well, I can't help you, answer that one fully, as I don't know how much money you have and how much you make and whatever. So, but I can say that the extra power and torque of a diesel usually has a cost, and sometimes very expensive surprise costs. All right. So basically it comes down to, how deep are your pockets? Can you afford to pay for a $9,000 fuel system replacement because you stopped at the wrong gas station and got a little bit of water, which they're not going to pay for that either, because unless you got a half a tank of water, that they won't say, hey, I'll pay for your fuel system replacement because you got a cup full of water from my diesel fuel tank. No, they're not going to. So if you got a half a tank of water, they might, but it's not likely that was the issue. Usually it's a little bit of water from multiple different fuel stations that build up in the filter, and then boom, sucks in a gob and destroys the fuel system. So anyway, how deep are your pockets? If you can afford to pay for some of this added expense, then so be it. But and then we come down to, what do you want? If you've got extra money and you want to have a little extra pulling power to play with and go up those hills a little faster, then that's great. Go for it, right? Money gives you options, right? So you might as well have fun with it, right? But if you're on a budget, I'm on a budget. I'm retired, and I'm on a budget, trying to travel around the USA with 3 boys, 15, 13, and 3. So I'm on a budget. So I'm trying to save money where I can. And I decided, after my experiences, that I was going to go with a gas engine, because I didn't want crazy surprises that maybe I couldn't afford to pay for. It'll happen. So that's the deal. If you got the money and you want the power and the torque and you want to go up those hills fast, then or you have really good reason, like mountains or massive trailer that you need to pull, and you're traveling a lot, then then go for the diesel. But for the average person, the average RV, you don't need a diesel to pull it around the country. So that would be my recommendation. My recommendation is, gas engine will do the job. You don't need the diesel. You don't need to spend the extra money. And so that's my recommendation. Other than that, you can do whatever you want. Have a wonderful day.